transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison.
All right, here we go. You guys ready for the democracy to intensify? Welcome to Colonial Outcast, your friendly neighborhood anti-imperialist podcast. And today we are going to be talking about our two potential future warlords. That's right, the presidential debate. Kamala, however Trump's pronouncing it, is coming off as more hawkish, but Trump will finally put an end to the rash of fried poodle eating that's happening in Springfield. Thank God. Oh, we're on Patreon, by the way, in case you want exclusive content. So this is going to be our debate analysis. Who won? Who lost? Not trying to give away the ending, but if your guess is America and the world at large, you might not be wrong. My name is Greg Stoker. I'm joined by co-host Mark Wayne and special guest Ahmad from Propaganda and Company, which is a channel you should definitely check out if you're not familiar. Link in description. So he's having some camera issues, but we can still hear you fine. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. It's really great to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So maybe you could give us a brief pitch real quick before we get started about what Prop & Co. is for some of the audience who might be aware of what y'all are trying to do or your mission statement.
Right, thanks. Yeah, so we're a small collective of creators. We're script writers, we're editors, we're animators. We do all types of different content, and we're essentially committed to dissecting mainstream propaganda. For the last year, it's basically been focused on Israeli atrocity propaganda, but we've done some content on the Russia-Ukraine war. We also dabble in economics. We do some videos on that. We do a lot of satirical animation skits. So if you've ever seen any of our content poking fun at the last debate, actually that video went pretty viral. But basically, we just use our skills to raise awareness about mainstream propaganda and cut through the lies and help people gain a deeper understanding of the truth.
Awesome. And that's why I definitely wanted to invite you on. I actually flew down to Tampa a few months ago, and we did a segment together. So that was
we had
awesome.
An awesome podcast.
Yeah, it was great. So also, speaking of like propaganda and all the stuff happening in the debate, it is 9/11, and the exploitation of the tragedy of September 11th today is intense. We'll get into this at the end, but as we heard VP Harris bring up the debunked atrocity propaganda about October 7th, it is important for us, I think, to realize that we lived through 9/11 and all we got from it was a crappy surveillance state. It wasn't just a tragedy. It was a catalyst for endless war, surveillance, and the erosion of civil liberties. As we remember the lives lost, let's also confront the exploitation of their memory to justify imperialism and violence abroad. True justice means dismantling systems that profit from endless war. Almost 3,000 Americans were killed, and roughly 1.5 million people of West and Central Asia were killed in a subsequent series of illegal wars. 9/11 normalized war on Arabs and Muslims, and we are seeing the same old talking points and neocon playbook BS play out over Iran. But before we get into that, what's y'all's overriding impression of the debate? I felt like I was watching two Republicans go at it, and if I followed this debate correctly so far, Democrats should vote for the Democrat because she'll fight China and promote fracking and oil drilling because she's been endorsed by Republicans and because conservatives support how tough on crime she is. Am I missing anything? So I guess, Ahmad, to begin with you, like, what was your impression of the debate, and does it change the state of play at all?
Yeah, so I was telling you this last night. I don't feel as though it really moves the needle in any one direction. I think most people enter these debates kind of already knowing who they're going to vote for. The debate is not really to change their mind. It's just for them to kind of show up and root for their team. There are obviously some swing voters. I don't have enough data or information or like feedback to see like what their impression was. But I think so most people probably have not changed their minds. But I will say, like, if we had to decide who the better performer was on stage, I would say it was obviously Kamala Harris. She did a really good job of getting Trump to focus more on himself. She threw out bait here and there, like talking about his rallies and calling him a criminal. And she just threw him off center, and honestly, he's an easy person to throw off center. It's like he has ADD. He goes on there and he's all over the place. There was a really funny tweet that I'll text you if you want to try and throw it on there.
Yeah,
But
what is it?
yeah, I'll send it over to you. But it was just making fun of like how all over the place he was. And so in terms of like debate performance, I think Donald Trump definitely lost. He didn't do a good job of, I guess, exposing Kamala for her failures. Not emphasizing the fact that, you've been in office for the last 4 years. Democrats have been in office for the last, 12 out of 16 years. And so you guys are talking about making all these changes when you guys have essentially dictated the policy, for the almost last 2 decades, really. So poor performance on Donald Trump's part, but I don't think it makes much of a difference. What did you guys think?
Well, actually, I would like to play a clip from Fox News pundit about this. So even on Fox News, they're kind of like, not a great night for Trump.
Make no mistake about it. Trump had a bad night. He rose to the bait repeatedly when she baited him, something I'm sure his advisors had begged him not to do. In the first debate when Biden attacked him, he just kept his cool and kept going. In this debate, he rose to debating, and we heard so many of the old grievances that we'd long thought that Trump had learned were not winners politically. Mm-hmm. And there they all were, talking about how he didn't lose the election and all that. I mean, my sense is that she came out of this in pretty good shape. Now, how long this will last and is anybody's guess. But for tonight, at least, this was pretty much her night.
You're saying she had a good night?
I'm saying she certainly did.
Sean Hannity is in the spin.
Yeah. So again, though, will it change the like anything? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so. Unless, it would have to be a debate as bad as Joe Biden had last time. That's the kind of performance that I think would change people's minds significantly enough for it to be reflected in polling data. But I didn't see any of that last night. But, actually, they said Lindsey Graham was backstage. I heard this on Breaking Points. Crystal and Sagar were talking about it. But Senator Lindsey Graham was backstage, and he was really upset. And he demanded that Trump fire his debate preparation team. So even internally, they all agree that he didn't do a good job whatsoever.
Yeah, but it's not really their fault. I don't think you can actually control Trump. And I do think what you sent me last night, Ian Carroll had a great tweet. He says, as a former liberal, everybody already voting Democrat just watched Kamala eviscerate Trump. I mean, I don't like either candidate, obviously, but I still saw that. Everyone voting Trump just watched a 3-on-1 with no regard for facts. State of play hasn't changed. Kamala is still the establishment pick, backed by the entire neocon establishment. Trump is still the outsider backed by everyone willing to stand up to the empire. All I could think with the whole time was, damn, I wish Bobby was on that stage. Well, I have no problem with RFK Jr. not being on that stage, but those are some pretty solid points, however.
Yeah, I agree. With the exception of the last 2 lines, I don't think Trump is going to stand up to the empire. I haven't seen any evidence of him ever doing that. I don't know why people have this impression of him doing that, but yeah, I think he hit it on the head. I think people see what they want to see. So Democrats think Kamala eviscerated him, which honestly she did. She did a really good job. She's great at performative empathy, and so I think.
But it wasn't hard though.
With her. What is it?
It's not like it gives the impression that she eviscerated him, but it's not like it was that hard to do. Like she was well prepped in her. It sounded like she had a bunch of monologues that were well prepped. She memorized a bunch, so it wasn't that much of a debate in a sense as it was just blocks of her prepping really good speeches about what she was going to do, which didn't have any relevance in our daily lives. It didn't feel like it was going to be effective, but with it's like, I think that from the outsider's perspective, if you're not in a Kamala camp and you're not in a Trump camp, if you look at that, I would say it wasn't that hard to do what Kamala did. If that makes sense.
That's an excellent point. You're right. It wasn't really much of a debate. It was basically just pauses between sound bites that she was delivering. That she did a good job memorizing and performing.
Yeah, she
Um,
memorized a bunch of blocks of statements. It's
And
not like I don't think she could have been able to hold up in an actual debate where the opponent was probing her with policy or her past. I don't think she would have held up. It doesn't take a lot to get Kamala to crack, and Trump simply just didn't do that. He didn't probe Kamala where he could have probed her to cause her to crack. So it was very much kind of Trump gave her an easy one, in my opinion, and because of he was him, and he was just focused on he was on the defensive. He was so focused on being on the defensive and getting people scared of immigrants and xenophobia. He was so focused on that he lost so many opportunities of just probing her on who she is and what she's done in the past. It does not
It-
take an educated person to really get her to crack because of her very open public record of just the horrendous things she's done in her career that I would have done. I would have cracked her. Like Tulsi Gabbard,
I
right?
would've-
you would've
Tulsi Gabbard. Did you? Tulsi Gabbard eviscerated her.
Oh yeah, obliterated her. Absolutely.
You would think that Trump would have studied that debate and do the same thing that Tulsi Gabbard did. You know?
No, I think Trump instead wanted to say, some very notable lines like they are eating the pets. She wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. The mother decides she doesn't want the baby, you execute. That's not abortion, that's an execution, and nobody wants that. They'll go back to solar. We need a whole desert for solar. I'm actually a fan of solar. I read she was black. I have concepts of a plan. Yeah, so I do think that's a good point. I think that one of the main reasons that she hasn't been doing interviews is because she doesn't really have a fastball when it comes to responding. But with Trump, with what was Trump was giving, she just had to kind of look a certain way while he was talking, and then do a bunch of rehearsed statements. So yeah, I think instead of like doing interviews, I think she's just been prepping for this. And no clearer. Do we have an example that she was going off monologues than when it came to Israel Palestine? And just to I'm gonna send it because it's literally cookie cutter speech of what she gave on her first controlled interview. What was that, last week or the week before? So it's literally it's the same monologue.
You added, quote, "It matters how," saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7th,
Oh, here we
Hamas,
fucking go.
a terrorist organization
No.
slaughtered 1,200 Israelis.
Slaughtered.
Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely...
They're still going with this fucking narrative. Okay.
Israel
I'm
has
just
the
gonna
right
listen.
to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters.
Boom. That's literally the same inflection and the same tone and everything that she used in the past interview.
This
is literally the same fucking talking point.
Far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat to Iran and its proxies posed to Israel.
All hail the new neoliberal
Where we
warlord.
can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
So that's I like how much of a non-answer that was to anything beyond, Israel. So it was just talking points, more to Mark's point. So, Yeah.
Yeah, I liked what when they were asking the question, how you can just see her brain working. Like, okay, I got this. I memorized this. 1200 slaughter. Okay, let's go. And then she starts, and that hasn't been updated. That statement hasn't been updated for 9 months. It's like she's talking in December right now,
Mm.
and it wasn't
So-
1200.
What I find interesting is we must chart a course towards a two-state solution. She's not even saying we need two states. It's like we
Yeah.
need a course that could
Yeah.
lead to a
It's
two-state.
it's almost like when Trump said last night, "I have a concept of a plan."
Yeah, pretty much. So it's sad, but I mean, I don't think we expected any different. And you know, both candidates are gonna do and say all the things that AIPAC and the ADL expect them to say.
Mhm.
So not surprising. I mean, I guess if we want to comment just briefly on the atrocity propaganda, specifically the mass rape lie, it is a lie. It's a hoax. It's been thoroughly debunked by independent media, by people like Zay Squirrel on X. If you don't follow him or them, I don't know their true identity. They're anonymous, but they're doing incredible work. Completely debunked. And it's a lie that is continuously repeated in order to justify and prolong this campaign of genocide. And so every single time you have a massacre, every single time you have an issue with the hostage negotiations, a new article will come out, a new claim will come out, basically suggesting that Palestinian men went into Israel, took young, innocent girls and sexually assaulted them and raped them, and then in some cases murdered them and then raped their dead bodies. So it's all one big lie, one big hoax, and it's been debunked, but it's been laundered by the media, and the purpose is so that Kamala Harris can stand on stage and say what she just said in order to justify what Israel is doing.
And what about
I
the
think-
number of 1200 too, right? The 1200 number, like obviously
1,200
we've seen-
casualties, you mean?
Yeah,
Supposedly, yeah.
I think it got dwindled down to 600. That's how many civilians.
I haven't seen that data.
Yeah, you're talking about civilians, yeah. So because they describe all 12, so it's actually 1,139. They initially said it was 1,400. They brought it down. People round up to 1,200,
and
but-
minus the people who were killed by the IDF.
The IDF, right? Yeah. So they say, you're right. They say 1,200 civilian casualties, which is not correct. You know, a significant portion. I don't know the exact number. Maybe like 1/3 were active IDF soldiers. We
And
won't
police
comment on the
officers.
reservists because technically everybody is a reservist in Israel. But yeah, a portion of that were not civilians. They were active duty soldiers who were, attacked at the bases. And then what of the actual civilians who were killed on that day, what portion of them were killed by the Israeli military? We don't have a specific number. I argue that it's a majority. I can't give you an exact
me as well.
number, but
Me as well. So
yeah.
I wish
think-
we'd get those numbers. I honestly wish we would get those figures already, so we could just be like, nope, wasn't 1,200.
I don't think you're ever going to get them, but I think the significant takeaway within the context of the debate was seeing a presidential candidate just straight up lie.
Yeah.
Because they know what happened better than we do. The CIA, which briefs the president every morning, does their own opposition collection on Israel. What are the reasons why we know that earlier last winter, at the beginning of the year, Israel was dropping almost 50% of dumb, unguided ordnance, was because the ODNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, does their own collection on Israel because we don't trust them. So seeing her, potentially the future president of the United States, just straight up lie and gaslight the American public is wild. But again, it comes back to this atrocity propaganda. We see a lot of links between October 7th and 9/11. Actually, Israeli Hezbollah really tries to link the two events so that, there's an impression that we are linked in solidarity against jihadism and stuff. So it's
Right.
meant to justify permanent war the further privatization of all aspects of life itself, expanding markets through plunder, extraction, continued increasing of funding for police, hyper-militarization and surveillance, anti-immigration, naturalization of class stratification, houselessness. So when people, I mean, that's at least what I argue, that all of these things are connected. So when we talk about being anti-genocide and having a problem with that, the people thinking that it's a single issue voter issue is absurd.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, absolutely. If we can, you mentioned a lot of issues just now, and what stuck out to me was houselessness and homelessness. There was one line where Kamala basically said she had a plan to address that. Of course, she never went into detail. And what stuck out to me about this debate, and this is not a new idea, I think we've watched this happen and progress and evolve every 4 years with the debates, but the debates they don't feel like they're about the policies anymore. They're not about the ideas. They're not about the issues anymore. It's empty platitudes, and it's attacking each other's character. And we saw that it started, I think in 2016 between Trump and Clinton, escalated a bit with Biden in 2020. And then now after this debate, I can't really walk away from the debate understanding any sort of plan. Like Kamala said, she had a plan to address houselessness. Like, we need more affordable housing. Okay, how are you going to do it? What policy are you going to implement? Who are you going to tax? Where's the funding going to come from? And Trump didn't do he didn't do anything either. And so I think that's a reflection of our culture. And it doesn't seem like the people really care.
I think they're a great instance of this in the debate. Well, I don't think they really answered any issue, but it was also, there was not just houselessness, it was like climate change, right? I thought it was pretty wild that during a 90-minute debate they spent a whole 4 minutes on climate change, with basically consisted of both candidates stating that they would not ban fracking, a practice that accelerates climate change, contaminates the air and water, has links to elevated rates of congenital heart defects, etc. Just thought they could have carved out, 10 minutes to discuss this existential threat to all of humanity and what they're going to do about it. But no, all Kamala was like, I'm pro-fracking. I'm never going to not be pro-fracking. And yeah, that's just another example of the same non-stance, non-issues. It's almost like it's a war and a cult of personalities. And I think back to the DNC, and the level of mass spectacle that went into propping Kamala up was kind of reminiscent of Leni Riefenstahl and the Triumph of the Will. It was just kind of crazy.
Yeah, if I could, I want to rewind a bit. When you were talking about why Kamala wasn't doing interviews, I don't think she was just avoiding interviews in order to prepare for this debate. I think it's a Obama Clinton strategy, because from my understanding is behind the scenes, they're the ones kind of guiding her as longtime career politicians, more experience than her. And so why not take their advice, right? It's going to be stuffed down your throat anyway, whether you want to take it or not. But I think they wanted to delay her doing interviews as much as possible so that it's less about the issues and the ideas and more about her personality. They don't want any Democrats complain. Like, they'd rather have people imagine her policies. Like, oh yeah, she's going to be great on climate change. How do you know that? She just feels like she's going to be, right? Yeah. But she hasn't. You haven't heard her say anything for or against. And I think they kick the can down the road. Like, let's have her speak as little as possible about the actual policy specifically, so that people can replace what she's actually going to do with their imagined idea of what she's going to do. And you see this a lot. Like, Glenn Greenwald and many other journalists are like, when is Kamala going to do an interview? We don't know what she actually thinks. The last time we heard her say something specifically about an issue was 2019, in the lead up for her campaign, where she got eviscerated, like Mark said, by Tulsi Gabbard. So I think she kicked the can down the road, not just because she's preparing for this debate, but because it's this new way of marketing a candidate. It's like Obama-esque, hope and change, feelings.
Yeah, it's all about branding.
It's all about branding. It's all about perception. It's not about policy ideas or any specifics whatsoever.
She was She was literally assembled by a marketing team, though. That's something we have to keep in mind.
Yeah,
absolutely.
and she might be going down that route of the aesthetics because of Trump's success with that and his, throughout his, time in office and when he was running, they realized the success of branding somebody based on personality. And I think that worked for Trump. So therefore they're thinking, okay, it's going to work again. I really think that a method is burning out though, with Americans, because as much as we want to imagine something, I think a lot of Americans are just waking up and being like, look, our lives are shitty. The economy's shit. We can't afford houses. We're spending money on endless wars and sending, so I think that Americans are like, all right, cool. Branding. What are we going to do? So I don't see anything that Kamala did as bringing any undecided over to her, maybe a few. I just think that it created more cheerleaders in her own camp. Like, oh my God, did you see the way she just stood so strong and resolute with Trump in that debate? And then, of course, but the good news about that debate I do see is that for the people who are kind of like on the fence with Trump, I think watching him just go down these weird rabbit holes really disillusioned a lot of them. Not that they're going to go vote for Kamala, thank God, but I think that a lot of them at least are no longer emotional. They're losing emotional investment in Trump by seeing him behave this way.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
I would push back on the idea that people are kind of like losing interest in the branding. I have seen, like, we're in because we're like media literate and we're actually like, I would say we're actually on the left. We kind of forget that most people are hyped about Kamala, and then Taylor Swift, if I'm not mistaken, Ahmad, you probably have been looking at this more than I have. Didn't Swiftie just endorse Harris?
She wrote a big letter. I can read it too.
Yesterday, last night after the debate, which is going to be interesting because of her relationship with Travis Kelce, and then in the NFL representing the Chiefs. I don't know if you guys know this, but there was a leaked document. I don't know if it's true, but there was a leaked document from a public relations firm. It's some kind of contract or non-compete agreement, and it's basically the firm supposedly representing Travis Kelce, and it was basically providing a timeline for when he and Taylor Swift are going to break up, which kind of confirmed this conspiratorial speculation that a lot of fans had, that this relationship is artificial and designed to popularize the NFL
with the young crowd
deeper. And they say that it's a psyop to draw a lot of NFL fans to Taylor Swift fans to the NFL, and then draw all of them to Kamala Harris when she eventually endorses her.
Well, that's a hell of a conspiracy theory. I don't think it's completely like necessary though, because the Democratic Party will always serve the interests of capital, and a lot of Swiftie fans. I don't know. I'm not huge into conspiracies. I have heard that letter could have been a fake or a forgery. I didn't look too much into it because I'm like, honestly, it really wouldn't surprise me. Taylor Swift needs breakups to generate new albums. So, I mean, of course, there's a shelf life. She needs another album.
That breakup from the Chiefs is going to be the album of a lifetime. They're going to have NFL fans going out and buying that album. Yeah, I heard that after she announced
warfare. She always needs a breakup. Yeah, it's hilarious. Yeah, I don't buy into it. I don't. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. But yeah, a lot of people do buy into it, so I feel it's worth mentioning.
About Taylor Swift releasing that letter, I think that letter was obviously prepped long before the debate, and I think that it was all strategic with the Democrats to bring in the Gen Z and younger millennials into the Kamala fold. I think that was all strategic. And you're seeing this across social media and across celebrities, is that you just have all these influencers now promoting Kamala, but it doesn't seem genuine. It just seems like it was a memo sent out to a bunch of influencers of people saying, hey, say this about Kamala. And you see these influencers who are normally neutral on stuff, who normally just make fun of everybody, suddenly picking a team and then promoting that. there's no doubt
That's
that they're being
excellent.
paid
Yeah,
to
that's
do
an
that.
excellent comment. There recently it was exposed that the DNC and the Democratic Party have been paying influencers to
Yes.
attend their conferences
Mhm.
and to make these highlight videos and just
Mhm.
make like really sweet, nice content about Kamala Harris.
Mhm.
And it does an excellent job of raising awareness and getting attention. But what remains to be seen is whether or not this is going to convert into actual votes. At the end of
Right.
the day, people need to get up and either fill in the mail-in ballot or go to the polls. And a lot of young people historically don't do that. They don't make time for that. Are they going to do that this time? We'll see. If they
Well,
do, I think she's got this election in the bag. But
Well, Ahmed, how do you think that this has been my opinion about Gen Z, and the ones that are getting old enough to vote? I think that they are like so many steps ahead in human evolution when it comes to discerning through like psyops and propaganda and manipulation. And I really I really see them as adapting to these manipulative tactics, and they're just, I think they're way more discerning than us millennials. So I have a lot of faith that the Gen Z generation is not going to buy it, because they're on TikTok and social media constantly. So they're just being bombarded with different types of sarcasm and
yeah,
manipulative tactics. I think they're just way beyond us when it comes to human evolution when
I
it comes to
think
that. So I don't think it's going to translate.
I have to say that I do think you are hopelessly optimistic. I follow a lot of Gen Z influencers who are completely pushing the Kamala envelope.
I'm not talking
So
about the influencers. I'm talking about the consumers. The
right,
influencers,
they have a lot of consumers though. You cannot disregard that.
they have the consumers, but are they? But okay, you got a Gen Z audience who follows these influencers, and they like
Mhm,
them. They like their videos. But then that
mhm.
influencers comes out with some out of pocket endorsement for Kamala Harris, and I think that a lot of their audience like, whoa, what the fuck? And you see that in the comment section. You see
yeah.
that happening in the comment section, but you also see these fake comments like "right on, Kamala's queen," and then you see like 11,000 likes, and then you realize, oh, wait a minute, this is all manufactured. This is all
Yeah,
digital
well,
manipulation.
yeah, the comments especially, that's an interesting point. The comments are actually manufactured.
Yes,
They create these
especially the
opinion
cheesy
leading
boilerplate
comments.
ones.
Yeah, they create these opinion leading comments. They bought them and they push them to the top, and they create the perception that the the comment section is one of the most highly manipulated places on the internet, because people always go to the comment section to try and understand, how should I feel about this, even if it's
Uh-huh.
just a stupid funny video. Let's see what the comments are saying. And so they manipulate the comments. But I agree with both of you, actually. I think Gen Z, because of the fact that they get most of their information from the internet, they are susceptible to getting the truth, right, in a way that previous generations stuck with, mainstream television, just a couple of channels. They weren't really going to be exposed to that kind of information unless they went out of their way to go get it. Now it's so easily accessible. At the same time, though, because this generation mostly gets their information from the internet, it's not really guided. I think they are, in a way, a lot more susceptible to propaganda. We know many different institutions, whether it's CIA, FBI, mainstream media, the Democrats, Republicans, they all use social media and manipulate social media, and they engage in these psyops like all the time. And Gen Z, I
Mhm.
think, like any other generation, is going to be susceptible to that. And so I think there are extremes. They are just like previous generations, in which they are interested in the truth and they're drawn to the truth. And because of the internet, uh, they are exposed to it, and they do a good job of pursuing it. At the same time, they're just as susceptible to the propaganda, and I think it's basically just the same as it's always been. It's just very extreme now on both ends.
So
That makes sense.
that it does make sense. And also, I think we've touched on Harris and the hysteria surrounding her, and I definitely think that she won the debates. But again, there is a problem, and that's how the ABC moderators handled it. So right now, let's check in with the right. So you've been watching Twitter. I'd say the cope about the debate is very intense for Trump supporters, but they aren't completely wrong in their grievances that it seemed like a 3-on-1 debate.
Yeah, you're seeing that all over. I mean, so I think objectively, you could argue the fact checkers were more interested in Donald Trump than they were in Kamala Harris.
Mm-hmm.
I think objectively, you can say that. Of course, that's being used, as you said, to cope with the fact that Trump had a piss poor debate performance
Mm-hmm.
and he can't be coached. And so they're going to fire his debate team, but it doesn't matter who's coaching him. He is not going to change his habits overnight. So, yeah, but I think it was reported that the fact checkers addressed something Donald Trump said 11 times, and I think Kamala 0 times, if I'm not mistaken, or if they did address her, it was once or twice. So, and then there was
the ball
there was this one portion about sarcasm where Donald Trump said he was being sarcastic, and the fact checker fact checked him on his sarcasm. He's like, I didn't detect any sarcasm. And Megyn Kelly tweeted, and screw her, she's the worst. But she tweeted something funny. She said, how can you fact check sarcasm? Like, so they're using this, of course, to, make the argument that this was an unfair debate. It was 3-on-1. And I think there's some truth to it, but it doesn't cover up the fact that he had a bad performance.
Right. And now we've seen Kamala Harris's stance on Israel. Let's take Trump's, and it's going to be wildly out of pocket. I think if I recall correctly, based off last night, he immediately pivots away from Israel-Palestine to Russia. And we'll get into that in a second.
You negotiated
Here's
with
Trump.
Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza.
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you ended up far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel.
Gonna have to fact check that.
President, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one.
Israel will not exist for 2 years from now. It's like, are you trying to get people to vote for Harris? But I think, that was it. Just you can't follow anything he says. I think they were basically, as you mentioned, just giving AIPAC ADL talking points. But another thing that came out of this debate is all these Hezbollah accounts on like X and other social media platforms are now like, Harris hates Israel, and nothing. She was literally just lying for Israel.
Yeah,
I don't get it.
Yeah. Trump is like all over the place. It's weird how he went to Russia, Ukraine. To quickly comment on him before focusing on Israel again. He is so used to, I think, speaking on his own stage to his crowd. He hasn't even really been on X. He's been on Truth Social more. And so it's this bubble where he's used to talking the way he talks. And I think he's just been trapped in that. So he gets on the debate stage and he forgets how to debate. I mean, he was never really that much better than he was last night, but at least he was a little more focused. And that was just honestly just terrible. But yeah, with Israel Palestine, it is interesting that he pivoted so fast. It's almost like he didn't want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the case, why do you think that might be?
Well, okay. So one thing is all of his supporters bring up is that no wars were started under Trump. They see him as an anti-war America First candidate, which is why I think he doesn't know how to solve the Israel-Palestine thing, or he's not willing to like pressure Israel in any way. We know he took 100 million, as I recall, from Miriam Adelson, the wife of Sheldon Adelson, the Zionist billionaire, for his campaign funding. I don't think he can say anything about Israel bad or critical. And so I think he pivoted to Ukraine because that's where I think he sees himself as an anti-war candidate. He says his talking point is the Israel-Hamas thing would have never happened under my presidency. The war in Ukraine would have never happened under his presidency. And he says these ridiculous things like, if I get elected president, the war in Ukraine will end before I'm even sworn in. And it's funny because the Russian foreign minister Lavrov is like, no, even if Trump gets elected, the war in Ukraine is not necessarily going to end in 24 hours. I don't know what he's talking about. So I don't know. These are just talking points, but I think this feeds into what he's trying to present himself as, the anti-war, anti-neocon candidate in some ways.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Donald Trump does regularly tell people that the war would have never happened, which is funny because he funded the Ukrainian military for years in the lead up, and he like directly threatened a German delegate about the pipeline, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, basically telling them, don't do this, and if you do, we're not going to let you do this. And this was like early on in his presidency. So not only would the war have started during his presidency if he were reelected in 2020, but he is like directly complicit in the war breaking out by funding the Ukrainian military, which increased them in strength, which led Putin to believe, I either fight them now or I fight them later. So it expedited Putin's plan in Ukraine. And that's a direct consequence of his actions, which really aren't his actions. I mean, I think you guys would agree with this, but these presidents don't really come in with their own policies. They come in with options that are presented to them by the deep state. Like, hey, if you want to take a policy position internally, we're debating whether we should, fight China on Taiwan in this way. What do you think? You can choose from one of these three options that we lay out for you. That's how I see it.
I agree in principle. I personally don't believe in the deep state, but I do believe in the intersectional interests of capital and the imperialist donor class. So, I mean, it's pretty much, it's performatively, there is an agenda. When you get up to the top, it's a uniparty system. So, and I think as someone who's kind of
militarily, like the deep state.
Okay.
When I say deep state, I mean like Pentagon, long-term unelected officials who regularly advise the president, have been there for several administrations. Like the same guy who spoke to Obama is probably the same guy who speaks to Trump.
There's a very dense structure there, a very dense layered structure that has been there for a long time, no doubt. I mean, I don't think anyone would argue that.
I would definitely agree that he does try to paint himself as an anti-war candidate, but no, I think that, both parties wanted to get out of Afghanistan. So he's the one who started negotiations with the Taliban and began that withdrawal so that he could do it early in his second presidency. And then Biden got in and didn't stop it. So there's a lot of examples of how foreign policy, regardless of whether or not whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, looks the same. It just looks the same. I think the substantive difference is, social issues. Under Trump, there will be no after birth abortions. There will be more protections for LGBTQ rights, bodily autonomy under Harris. But they were literally just bragging about who was more pro-cop, more pro-fracking, more pro-Israel. So I don't
forget the Dick Cheney flex from Kamala. I love that.
Oh wait, what? Remind me what happened?
Oh, she was flexing that Dick Cheney supported her, or is now endorsing her.
Yeah, she talked about
Dick
how
Cheney, his wife,
Republicans support her as well.
It's a really odd flex to do for a Democrat, but this is where we are. I want to look real quick about Trump, and what would be like the ultimate torpedo question for Trump that I wish somebody would ask him on stage is simply, are you going to send more money to Israel if you are president? That is the most difficult question he could ever try and answer, because on one hand, he has to appease his America First anti-war base, and on the other hand, he has to appease his, ADL APAC masters. How does he answer that question? And they didn't ask him that, and that would have been the perfect question to ask him, right? And I mean, Kamala, of course, would say, "Yeah, fuck anything Israel wants, I'll do." But for Trump to answer that question, his body would literally just split in half if he were having to ask that question.
I think most of his supporters, I feel like most of his supporters are heavily evangelical in bent and heavily like, oh, terrorists, GWAT, especially,
I don't know about that. I have to push back. I think that he has this base that's growing, that's America First. Let's stop caring about all these other countries. A lot of them are also infested with a lot of anti-Zionism that's more based on anti-Semitism as opposed to just being anti-Zionism. So you have that growing. You have the alt-right who are conspiracy theories, who are conspiracy theorists about Israel, along with a lot of other shit. So you have to understand that this is all mixing together now. Like anti-Israel shit, conspiracy shit, America First stuff is all mixing together in this soup that's on the right. And you cannot discount that. It's not like this monolith. It's like, oh, they're like all evangelicals who are pro-Israel. No. Trump's base is so varied. And I've talked to every single person in that category. And a lot of them are becoming more and more anti-Israel. So, like I said, you ask them that question, ooh, it would be a great question. And they never asked the good questions. They never asked the good questions in these debates, ever.
So, then if that's the case, are there a lot of 9/11 was an inside job people on the right?
Are you kidding me?
Hey, I don't talk to these people all that much.
You're in Texas, bro. How are you not talking? If I was in Texas, I'd be interviewing every single dude with a freaking raggedy red cap on.
I'll send you a tweet, Greg, that demonstrates. Okay. I'll send you a tweet that demonstrates he's a really big figure on the right. He's kind of libertarian as well. It's weird. There's a lot of crossover these days. But let me send you this guy. I don't know if you know him, Dr. Simon Godek.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a 9/11 truther, and there's a lot of 9/11 truthers on the right.
Mm-hmm. A lot of them. A lot of anti-Israel truthers on the right as well. There's a lot of dancing Israeli truthers on the right.
Oh yeah.
I'm a freak in the sheets and a 9/11 truther on the streets. Okay, wow, yeah.
Yeah, what's interesting about the struggle for the narrative surrounding 9/11 is that, to me, it's another sign of the collapse of like any trust in the narrative of those in power. And I think now a lot of that is focused on Israel post October 7th. And that's partly because of like the Groypers and the America First movement with Nick Fuentes. Much of it is arguably anti-Semitic. A lot of it is, legitimate criticism of Israel's influence in America. And I think this war for like what really happened on 9/11 and who's actually responsible for it is a big indication that the narrative is completely collapsing like everywhere.
Regardless of what you think about 9/11, regardless of whether you think it was conspiracy or not, I do think that the conspiracy of 9/11 being an inside job is actually very healthy, regardless if it's true or not, because it's at least pushing people in this direction that all the emotionals, all the emotions, the sentiments, the nationalism, the manipulation surrounding 9/11 was bad and false and should never be done again. And so that's a healthy direction, even if people believe that the conspiracy theory is absolutely false. I think the end result, the end sum, is actually a positive. I really do. It's a weird way to put it because it's a lot better than people being like than a growing sentiment that Muslims did it. So it's like this. You have two choices. A sentiment grows that Muslims are more dangerous and we keep 9/11 in that memory and that nationalism grows against Islam and against Muslims, or you have a sentiment growing that the government did it and the government's evil and they killed American citizens and they blamed it on the Muslims. Which one would you choose? I choose this one over here. What do you think though?
Greg?
Either of you.
I think I don't think it's going to be as clear cut as that. I think that people can believe that the government did it and still be incredibly Islamophobic at the same time.
That's true, but it makes less and less sense to keep blaming Muslims for stuff, knowing that the government did whatever the government was blaming Muslims are doing.
I mean,
like everything that
it is a sign of like a healthy dose of skepticism. People should be
Mhm.
skeptical of whatever the government tells them, and I think we are seeing that. And on the internet, information travels so quickly. I mean, we're seeing now, like, this rumor that a woman ate a cat in Springfield, Ohio, and that spread really quickly. And then I found out this morning because I watched the video last night. I was like, is this real? And I saw this clip of this black woman being arrested for eating a cat. But it turns out she's not Haitian. She's an American citizen. And she killed the cat and she like bit into it, but she wasn't trying to eat it. She was just kind of insane. So, yeah, but that
That's some
information
mental
spread
health
like
crisis right
wildfire because of the internet. So I think
Can we
people are-
address the Roe v. Wade real quick? That was a huge portion of the debate. I mean, the debate I believe fired off with that, wasn't it? Wasn't that the first topic? Okay, so the Roe v. Wade thing is all the people that I know that are voting for Kamala. That's their main sticking point. I know this one girl. She's an extreme feminist. She also is very pro-Palestinian and was involved in the pro-Palestinian movement for years before. But she is so pro-Kamala, and she doesn't. And she's kind of just like, I don't care if she's part of the military-industrial complex. It's got to be worse under Trump. And how? So it's again, she's choosing that one topic of bodily autonomy over everything else that Kamala stands for. And it pisses me off about her, but it's something we need to address because they spent a good chunk of that debate talking about Roe v. Wade. And it's frustrating to me because obviously the only reason why Roe v. Wade was able to, or the reason why it's consequential that it got overturned is because the Democrats did not codify it when they had plenty of opportunity and years to do so. And I believe that was a very strategic move by the Democrats to not codify Roe v. Wade, to always have something that they can fight for in the eyes of Americans that makes them distinguished from the Republicans. Is my assessment off on that?
I don't necessarily disagree. I'm not sure if it was super conspiratorial, but I mean, you're not wrong that they do need a boogeyman. Both parties need a boogeyman to make themselves electable. But I will say about Roe v. Wade, that is a great social issue that they can fight for because it's definitely not going to be about gun reform. 4 days ago, Kamala made a statement after the school shooting in Appalachia, and now she's just like, yeah, we're not taking away your guns. I own a gun. Tim Walz owns a gun. We're both gun owners. We're not going to touch guns. So,
which actually, I mean, I'm not complaining about that. I'm a huge gun guy, but it's weird. Because I think she's trying to get some people who are red over to her by saying that. Like she is trying to appeal to Trump's base now.
I mean, aside from Roe v. Wade, everything in correct me if I'm wrong, Ahmad, was like seemed to me to be center right, if not right.
Definitely right.
Yeah, absolutely. The Democrats, not only on like the gun issue or even the border, Camilla's like trying to make it sound like she's going to appeal to everyone, like, oh, I'm going to let a bunch of migrants come, but also, I'm going to be like really tough on the border. I'm not going to let anyone in. She's trying to like play both sides. But
yeah, she is.
What was interesting was how hard she pushed for war.
I know.
Like, she was like,
George Bush up in
Trump on, oh, you're getting too cozy with China. And then with Putin, she's like, you're not going to stand up to him. America's not about this. We have to support Ukraine to the bitter end.
We need to contain Iran.
Yeah, a bunch of, it's like she's a war hawk. And, Democrats have always been war hawks. But like the perception that the voters had was, the Democratic voters at least, was that the Democrats are the anti-war party. And they don't seem to care that that's no longer the case. It's very strange. The Democrats, I think, have learned that we can talk openly about war and our base won't care whatsoever.
Ahmed, how do you feel like that will translate to the voting Democrats? Do you think that will have any effect? What you just
they don't care. They don't care.
Roe v. Wade, baby.
Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade. I swear, if they did not have Roe v. Wade as a topic, the Democratic Party would be irrelevant. Like just no relevance whatsoever. Like that's why they spent so long talking about it. And Kamala did
point.
this great emotional appealing speech.
Yeah, she did.
About you
Yeah.
saw that? Like
Mhm.
she really performed that one.
I was gonna
And
cry. I was like, damn.
she should have gotten an Oscar for that shit. But it was so manipulative. And it's just like, dude, you guys had so long to codify it, and it would have even mattered. So to me, it's just, yeah, Greg thinks it's a conspiracy theory. I think it's just long-term political strategy.
I think it's opportunism. But
but it's long-term, which
yeah. I mean, that's just my view of imperialism in general. And the system that perpetuates it. But yeah, guys, I don't see this moving the needle at all in terms of what's going to determine the election. Also, everything's so crazy and the news cycle's so insane that we've got like what 2 months before the election. A lot can happen in that time.
Tomorrow it'll be a whole different world. So this has very little effect. What I think it will have an effect on?
What?
I think it's going to maybe push Trump back closer to who he was in 2016, because he's going to hear so many people tell him like, bro, who are you? Like, you used to be this energetic guy, fiery, and
He was tired. He looked tired.
Yeah, like you're not the same. You're not the same. What happened to you? And I think Trump has been taking the advice of these advisors who have been telling him that, listen, last election you went too far, and the way you responded turned off a lot of like white center-right Republicans. So like my neighbor, for example, he's a Christian and he lifelong Republican. Last election, he told me, I'm not voting for Trump. I'm going to vote for Biden. And after January 6th, he was like, I cried when I saw what happened on the news. I don't think I could ever vote for Trump again. I don't know if I could ever vote Republican again. And so I think Trump has been a kind of like moderate in comparison to who he used to be in order to try and win back some of those people. And I pay a lot of attention to like the Groypers on X, because they're like to the right of Trump and they're barking at him to be who he used to be. And he's been like kind of stiff arming them a little bit. But they feel as though they're doing a better job of drawing him back to the right towards them with his rhetoric, because they're telling him, hey, you're trying to win over these voters you lost in 2020 by being someone that you're not. And that's not helping you. It's hurting you. And I think the feedback to his performance last night, I think that's going to inspire him to kind of be more abrasive in the lead up, especially if he starts getting desperate. If the poll numbers really don't go in his favor, I think he's going to react, and he's going to be really abrasive and like he's going to incite emotion with some, outrageous, bold take like he used to do. So I think that might move the needle in that regard, in his rhetoric and his performance.
Yeah. Well, what we've seen is we have a far right candidate and a right candidate, and it's 9/11. So before we end, because we're pretty much out of time, I just want to say that while mainstream U.S. institutions solemnly memorialize 9/11, we must #never forget the countless victims of our own murderous government. There was a lesser known 9/11 resulting from U.S. imperialism. On September 11th, 1973, a CIA-backed military coup ousted Salvador Allende, the democratically elected socialist president of Chile, paving the way for 2 decades of brutal capitalist dictatorship. Under the rule of General Augusto Pinochet, more than 3,000 people were murdered and more than 30,000 were tortured. These 2 9/11s are part of a broader history of prolific bloodshed initiated by the United States. And Kamala Harris, if elected, will, based off of what she said and the debate, maintain that long, proud, and esteemed tradition of U.S. foreign policy. That's how I see it.
Well said. Very well said.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, guys.
Well, want to talk about January 6th, but I guess we'll wrap it up because that was a fun one. I love that part of the debate. It was hilarious.
Yeah, but I mean, I can't unpack the whole thing. It was just such a mess. Anyways, Thank you all so much for listening to the bread and circuses that is the American political landscape. Again, you can follow Ahmad on social media and Propaganda and Company. We'll link that in the description. And thank you so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
All right. See y'all in the next one. Have a good week.